Yes, we're being recorded, and this is the Manchester French Theatre. Um, number 6, I think, in the series of interviews that we've done with um, lots of people over the past year or so. And this is with Richard Gallagher, and we wanted to particularly look at the Manchester writers, um, the Manchester Writers Group, which was a kind of informal thing that they had, and produced many uh, actually well-known writers that went on to become well-known. And Richard was one of them, and he was
Not one that became
yeah.
well known particularly, but it was a big part of my career and what I'm really happy about.
And this was about this was at the time when um, the Arts Council decided that new writing was a thing, and that a thing that they wanted to encourage.
Yeah, you could get a grant against stage management costs, which is what we did. And that meant you could put the play on, which was great. So you could get together with an idea and you were guaranteed that your stage management costs were covered. That didn't cover my costs as a writer or the director or the actors. That was up to box office split, which, as you well know, is a euphemism for you don't get anything.
Yeah.
That's how we did it. We could at least get them on.
So, what was it like growing up in Oldham? What was Oldham like?
It's horrendous.
Indeed.
Apart from when I found
I think we're about the same age, aren't we? And
okay,
so we grew up in the '60s, in the early '60s.
Yeah.
And in working class towns in sort of the north.
Yeah, Oldham was North Manchester, is North Manchester. And I'm a gay man, and it was pretty homophobic, and it was pretty bloody awful until I found the Oldham Coliseum, which was wonderful. Met a load of people there who not only helped my career but helped me personally. And I joined. There was a Wednesday club at the Oldham Coliseum for burgeoning theatricals, which was run by Annie Kirkbride and a chap called Monday, who was then known as Conrad Monday. And we used to go after school and do basically improvisation work and stuff like that, which I absolutely adored. And that kind of was my first foray into theatre. Yeah.
I recently saw an interview. I read an interview actually with David Hoyle, who grew up in a similar kind of town to us. He grew up in Blackpool. He said, if you grew up being different in the '60s and '70s, like I did, you were completely persona non grata. I was brought up to believe that I was completely beyond the pale and that polite society, anyone decent, wouldn't want anything to do with me.
Yeah.
That leads to feelings of alienation and isolation.
Well, it
kind of all had that feeling.
Yeah, in everything apart from theatre. Once you were at the theatre, it was fine. People accepted you. Theatre was always ahead of the mark, I suppose, politically, and culturally as well. Yeah.
Tell us about Dora Bryan.
I met Dora when I was about 14, I think, and she did a show called Dora at the Coliseum, at the end of which she sang "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend," and through these diamantes, they weren't valuable bits of glass, into the audience. And I worked out, because I was doing front of house then, I worked out that they must cost her something, even if they're not real diamonds. So I used to go and collect them and then deliver them to her dressing room, which she was terribly grateful for, or appeared to be. And many years later, she was doing Hello, Dolly for my friend Paul Kerrison.
Yeah.
Paul. It was the year that I was nominated for a Manchester Evening News Theatre Award for French Paste as a writer. And Hello, Dolly was nominated as well. So this big table, and my friend Paul was there. And so I boldly went up with, I think, John Godbar. And she said, "Oh, you don't know Manchester, do you?" So I said, "Yes, I've lived here all my life." And Paul said, "Do you remember Richard Gallagher?" And no. "You remember John Godbar?" No. "Playwright?" Oh. "Well, have you got a pen? Because I want to draw you a little map to tell you where the hotel is, because I'm going back for a drink." And neither of us did have. And then suddenly Willie Russell walked past. She said, "Oh, Willie, you don't know Manchester, do you? Because I'm going back to the hotel." And he said, "Yeah, of course I know Manchester." She said, "No, you don't. Have you got a pen?" Well, he did have a pen. And he drew a map. She drew a map, sorry, on the serviette, which she gave to Willie, and not to John Godbar, not to me. And then she turned to both of us and she said, "Get yourself as a pen. You'll be as big as he is one day." Which I think John's retort was, "We've just been Dora'd."
I remember seeing her in that film. Many films actually with Dora. But what character? Great.
She always got cast as a dizzy, dotty, dumb blonde. And she said,
or a prostitute or something like that.
Yeah. "Why I keep being cast in these parts, I can't think." And the director said, "That's why."
Well, of course, the famous one is Taste of Honey, so which is, you know,
which she always used to refer to as a waste of money.
Really? Right.
She was brilliant.
That was one of, yeah, she was absolutely great in the part. Yeah. Who else would you put in it? Shelley Winters? I don't know.
Well, it was originally played by, oh God, what's her name? Forgotten her name. Avis Bunnage.
Oh, I've never heard of her.
Avis Bunnage was part of Joan Littlewood's theatre workshop.
Right. Okay. Theatre workshop. Yeah, that's the connection.
And brilliant. Yeah. So again, not 60s. Yeah.
That play was written by.
It was
a young working class girl who had never actually written a play before.
Sheila Delaney, and she had sent the script, and I think a lot of it is Joan. I think Joan honed it.
The Manchester Playwrights Workshop, I think, was kind of quite full of working class playwrights, wasn't it? In a sense. I mean, did you go to grammar school?
No. Oh, good.
No.
I didn't even do A levels. I went to a comprehensive, which
Would
was
you, so would you consider yourself a working class?
yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah, my dad was a mill worker. I was
Yeah.
born in the terraced house in a place called Tunnel Street in Oldham. So yeah, totally.
Okay, well let's talk about the Playwrights Workshop. Dave Simpson.
You're talking about Northwest Playwrights.
Yeah, Northwest Playwrights Workshop.
Yeah. That was a group. I wasn't entirely regular there, but I went at the Actors Centre in Manchester.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah, Dave was certainly a member. Dave was the resident playwright at my college when I was at drama school, Manchester.
At the Poly.
Technic School of Drama. It's now Manchester Met School of Drama.
How is it?
And Dave was our resident playwright and wrote quite a few things for us. I don't think I was ever in anything Dave wrote, but he was a member of that. As were quite a few people. We talked about this last night, and I couldn't quite remember. Marvin Close, I remember, was a member.
Yeah.
Possibly Amelia Bullmore was. I don't know that, but I think she might have been. Charlotte Keithley was, or might have been. But I don't know. I went one or two times, and that it was a touch base for writers in Manchester. It was great.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let's not dwell on that. Dave Simpson went on to write a few plays, a few things, and many. He was almost as prolific as you.
I think so. And more.
Amelia Bullmore. We were talking about this the other evening, and she wrote a play called Die, Viv, and Rose.
That's the one I was trying to remember the title of, which is so brilliant, and we always see it at audition speeches and things.
Really? Okay, good. Well, that was the play, and it transferred. I think it was originally done at the Royal Court or somewhere like that.
It was the Royal Court, I'm sure.
And then it transferred to the West End rather successfully, and they wanted to do films and television of it. And Amelia didn't want to do that because she thought it was a very theatrical thing, and she wanted it to remain as a theatre piece.
Fair enough.
There was also Helen Edmondson, who was also a member of Red Stockings, and she went on to do various things, and she wrote the first few Red Stockings shows, and then went on to adapt famous novels and stuff. But the first play that I was aware of that you had written was The Red Dragon.
It
was Sherlock Holmes and the.
It was Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, it was the first thing I wrote. I'd been in a play which you were also in, called Movie, which I've been in for I think about 4 years for Raw Material. Not Raw Material. It was Theatre Total, which was Nicky Carrascus.
And Rebecca Rubin.
Rebecca, yeah. I've been doing that for about 4 years, and we were in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I've done this. enough. I can't get any more out of it. So very amicably, I said to Ricky, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give up. And at the same time, Rosie O'Connell, who was our stage manager, also said she'd had enough. All very amicable, but we gave up. So we came back on the hovercraft. Rosie said, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I suppose sign on, which is what you did in those days. And she said, why don't you write something? I'd never even thought about writing anything. And I said, well, all right. And she said, and I'll direct it. I don't think she'd considered directing before. So we necessarily thought it should be a one-man play because that was cheaper. So I wrote this thing called The Red Dragon. I'd always been quite interested in Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes. So I wrote this idea that Dr. Watson and Conan Doyle were kind of the same person, and that they were trying to kill Sherlock Holmes. And we did it with voiceovers and stuff, with just me. And the Contact Theatre where we did it in the old brick house, do you remember that?
I saw it there. Yeah, I actually saw the production, yeah.
And it was Stella, second name I can't remember, Stella
Hall. Stella Hall.
Who was the administrator or something of the Contact. And she said, we really like it. Could you extend it to 3 or 4 people? And we'll pay for the next production, which is kind of why I thought, oh, yeah, all right, I can write.
was that the Ricky? Did Ricky Tarascus actually direct that first thing? Because I remember seeing it at the Brick House.
He might have both.
And he had directed it, and he was there, and that was the several cast. Yeah.
Yeah. Ricky certainly directed the three-hander one.
Yeah, that's the one I saw.
Not quite sure who directed the first one.
Okay, Rosie.
Of course, it was Rosie.
Rosie O'Connell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ricky extended it. Yeah, and then I remember that just before the curtain went up, sitting in the chair in the dark, sort of counting how many people were sitting in the seats and thinking, about breaking even. Oh yeah, we've just broken even. That's good. We're into profit. How much profit? And that's what was going through my head.
It's very nerve-wracking, isn't it, when you have a play, particularly your first play, on, coming on, going on, and you don't know how it's going to go down, and you don't know if anybody's even going to.
There was one night, it was supposed to start with the lights going to black and a match being struck in the dark, which then lit a pipe, and then the lights slowly growing on Sherlock Holmes sitting in this chair. And we were very keen that the matches were period, so that there was these sort of long Cook's matches.
Yeah, there's great big phosphorus things.
Which, of course, it broke in half, went down my crutch. Okay. One night it opened up with my bashing my crutch. Not the.
Yes, I remember you actually played Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah.
Which was rather daring. You never played that part again. I thought you were marvelous Sherlock Holmes, but
I was far too young.
At that point, yes, possibly. You then went on to write French-paced, the award-winning
Well,
play, and actually, I would say groundbreaking play as well.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not aware of anything that had dared to broach those subjects that were raised, and in the way it was done.
I'm sure there are now. At the time, probably not.
At the time, there weren't. No.
That came about because my friend Tim Donnelly, and we'd known each other for years, and he said we'd never appeared together, and he knew I'd written The Red Dragon. So he well, first of all, he came up with a play called The Servant by Robin Warm, and he said, oh, we must do this together. It was done on film by Dirk Bogarde and Edward Fox, I think. And Tim said, we'll do The Servant. And as it would happen, we had a friend, Peter Rogers, Pieter, P-I-E-T-E-R, who was a Granada producer. But he had been Robin Warm's secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And I rang Pieter and I said, Tim wants to do The Servant. And he said, oh no, you mustn't do that. So I said, why? And he said, it's a dreadful play. So I said, well, I've seen the film, it's marvelous. And he said, oh no, Harold wrote the film. Robin didn't write the film, Harold wrote it. I finally discerned he was talking about Harold Pinter.
Harold Pinter, yeah.
And he said, well, I'll send you a copy of it, and if you want to do it, but it's a dreadful play. And he did indeed send me a copy of it, and it was a dreadful play. And so I rang up Tim, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he said, well, I booked a theatre, which was the Green Room. And he then had a rather rich partner, Edward, who was marvellous. And he had booked the theatre for us. And I think we had about 6 weeks. So I said, well, I'm not doing that. And he said, well, do The Maids again. I directed Genet's The Maids, then about 3 times. I said I didn't want to do that again. So he said, well, write something. You've written that thing about Sherlock Holmes, write something. So I said, well, what on earth can I write about in what we had, 3, 4, 5 weeks? And he said, write about me. So I did. And to be fair to Tim, it wasn't really about him, but it was about a lot of things that politically frustrated me at the time. And at the heart of it was somebody who was sufficiently like Tim for him to be able to play it superbly. And it became very successful. We did 2 productions at the Green Room. It went on to Oldham with Michael Cashman, now Lord Cashman, playing the part that I played. Then went on to Questors Theatre, where I work in London, and also to the Shaw Theatre. Yeah, that kind of established the writing thing. And in fact, I always say Nick Marston directed the first production of French Post, and we sat in his kitchen and read it through for the first time. And Philip Oslet was in it, Tim was in it, I was in it. And they were all laughing. And I didn't realize it was comedy. I honestly did not realise it was comedy. I thought, okay.
You wrote yourself a great part in that play. It's something that when I first saw it, I thought, well, this is an interesting character, because this is the character that Tim played was you know, what one would expect in a way, the outrageous camp character. But this character that you played was not really what you expect of a gay man. Somebody quite serious.
At the time, there was a dichotomy, probably a trichotomy between. I always said, going on another tack, I always said that French Pace is not actually about gay politics. It's about feminist politics, because it's different views of what is a female. You've got a transsexual, you've got a gay man, you've got a politico, and you've also got, in later versions, Pam, my friend Pam, who is actually a woman. And it was about how males view females, I think.
It's interesting how one thinks about one's own work, and we're dwelling quite a lot on this play, aren't we? But yeah, how one thinks about one's work and how it's received. They can be completely different things.
When we did it at Eldon Rep, we got a completely homophobic reaction from the critics. They said it was tub thumping, that it was boring, that we used it as a strapline on the poster. Anybody of a sensitive nature should not go and see this play. I always love things like that.
That's marvelous, isn't it? You can't pay for publicity like that. Why did they have that?
It was the time, and people were very, very homophobic, and it was.
This was the late 80s, wasn't it? And I think they just passed this Section 28, was it?
Oh, Section 28 was in place then, yes.
Yeah.
There was a kind of homophobic surge over the country, yes. And then, of course, I became known as a gay playwright, which I slightly objected to. Yes, I'm gay, and yes, I'm a playwright. But gay playwright? No.
Well, yeah. Am I a heterosexual playwright then, or am I
exactly
a race playwright or whatever? It's kind of it is a bit odd, but at that time it was certainly I think it was very original subject, and for somebody to write a play like that, and there have been many others since, but I think you were one of the first people to do that. There was an American play, wasn't there, about
there were many before.
There were many. Boys in the Band and stuff like that.
But Boys in the Band was the 60s. Mark Crowley. Yeah. The contemporary one was Jonathan Harvey's Beautiful Thing, which is far better than French based. And he actually said to me, that is because I managed to get it on at the Bush Theatre rather than Manchester. It's a beautiful play, and it's called Beautiful Thing, and it's a lovely play, and that did a lot. But yeah, at the time there was the Normal Heart, there was Torch Song Trilogy.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
But yeah, you were sticking your neck out if you're going to that subject. Yeah.
What was the award that French Paced won?
Didn't win it. It was
it was up for
Manchester Evening News Best Playwright. Yeah. No.
Well,
didn't win.
You were robbed, my dear. Anyway, you then wrote the Dorothy Parker thing.
It was because Pam Buckle, who played it, who was a great friend of mine and splendid actor, wanted a one-person show to do. And we sat in her place then in Alderley Edge, I think it was. She moved to Didsbury sometime later. But we sat in Alderley Edge and we discussed everybody from Mary Queen of Scots to, oh God, I don't know, various people anyway. And finally, she said, "What about Dorothy Parker?" And I hadn't heard about Dorothy Parker. I didn't know much about her at all, to my shame. So I read Dorothy Parker's short stories, poems, reviews, and about 5 biographies of her. And I thought she was brilliant. So I said, yeah, let's do that one. So we did. So it was just convenient vehicle for Pam, really, to answer your question.
How important is research to you?
Well, hugely in that case, because of course the framework that I came up with was Dorothy Parker reviewing her own life in the acid way that she reviewed everything else. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have her leveling the same amount of bitterness and wit at herself, which she kind of did, as she did with, well, the framework, which was my invention, was that she hated A.A. Milne and Winnie the Pooh. She certainly didn't like A.A. Milne. She called him Whimsical Pooh, or something like that. And I thought it would be quite fun to have her doing that, which is what we ended up with. The big thing writing her was, of course, she's very humorous. And you had to find what her humor was about. And it was largely based on puns. It was largely based on a kind of acid skepticism, shall we say. But you had to replicate that because I made myself a promise that I would not use just her lines. I would make them up, which we did. And in fact, there was a line in the play, "Men will only hurt you in the back or stab you in the end," which was quoted in a review in the Manchester Evening News. And it said it's very easy to piece together all these Dorothy Parkerisms and turn them into a play. And yeah. I had read that review in the Royal Exchange Press Bar. And I said, you know, I wrote that, she didn't. And he said, oh shit. I think I succeeded. And we did it at the Green Room. which was directed by a lovely lady called Simon Forms. I was busy doing something else. I saw the production, and Simon won't mind my saying this. I didn't like it very much. Thought it was overproduced. It was then asked to go to Lancaster, to the Duke's Playhouse, and I redirected it and basically pared it all down, got rid of most of the sound, and Pam did it again in Lancaster. It was subsequently done at the Cockpit Theatre in Marylebone. Was the first time we'd done it with two people. My friend Lucy Ailey Parker, who was marvelous as the older Dorothy, and for the first time I had one of my ex-students, Gabriella Pond, playing the younger Dorothy, directed by Dan Dawes, again a friend. But that was wonderful to see that. And then it was done for radio, directed by kind of myself and a chap called John Fryer. So there is a radio version of it with Gabriella and Lucy doing it. Yeah, I adored writing it. It's I think still stands up as a good play. It's changed its title. It was originally called Dorothy Parker, no, it wasn't. Tiptoe Through the Tombstones was its original title, and then we decided to call it All My Burning Bridges. Mrs. Dorothy Parker, All My Burning Bridges. So that's what the later productions went out under. Well, that's about it. Razors pain you, drugs cause cramp, acids stain you, rivers are damp, guns aren't lawful, nooses give, gas smells awful. You might as well live. I thought she was brilliant and tragic. She spent most of her life trying to commit suicide, and so much so that her friend Robert Benchley came up to her once after she slit her wrist for the third or fourth time, and he said, "Dorothy, you really should stop doing this. You might hurt yourself." And in fact, she outlived all her friends. And I thought she had an acid and accurate view of the world, of people, and a brilliant pen. I mean, her writing is always, whatever she's doing, whether it's reviews, short stories, poems, is superb. I think she was a very lonely lady. I would have loved to have known her. I think she was a very special writer, a superb writer, yes. Pithy, accurate, right to the point, humorous, acid, brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, she was a brilliant writer. She was a female writer, so possibly the fact that she was and is acknowledged shows how bloody she was, because she was fighting all this misogyny that was around her.
How to dispose of a human corpse?
Originally, Adrian and Tony, who ran GDM company, asked me to write about the Moors murders, and I didn't want to do that. I said no. Mrs. Kirkbride, I can't remember her first name. I'm very sorry. But she had still had a son, Keith, out there, who she hadn't found. And I thought it would be insensitive and crass to write about that. And then I read Brian Master's book, Killing for Company, which was about Dennis Nielsen. And I thought, I could do that. I wrote a fictional Dennis Nielsen, but I centered it on an old lady who was living in the house, who was entirely persuaded that the man upstairs was killing boys and burying them in the back garden, and nobody would believe her. So it was a boy who cried wolf story. And yeah, it worked really well. I think what happened, and I'm pretty sure this is true, is that I was overheard in the Green Room bar talking to either Adrian or Tony, and I suggested this as an idea, and the next day it was in Mr. Manchester's diary in the Manchester Evening News. And I thought, well, I suppose I've got to now, haven't I? So I did.
What's your writing process? How do you write? I write everything out in longhand.
Used to.
And then I type it.
Now
I type it out. Yeah.
Used to do that and then bash it out on a Remington.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sellotape the pages together with cuts and things.
Mm-hmm.
Then I discovered a Brother typewriter. It was marvelous because it used to have a lift off ribbon. So you could take things like that way.
You told me once that you used to go around the central line because when you were trying to think of the scene or you were trying to think of a thing, you buy a ticket and then you would go around and around the central line.
Yeah.
And
also
you had to have distraction, which is, it's like most writers like to have a quiet room and peace.
I like
the opposite.
I like a buzz around me that I don't have to attend to. I used to write a lot in wine bars, a lot in Manchester Airport.
Right.
I now, well, not for the past year, of course, but British Library is great. Yeah. I like other people, but I don't have to contact them or talk to them.
Isn't it odd? Isn't it quite odd? Firak, do you have a question to ask?
Hello. No, I just joined. I'm surprised. I don't know what's going on. I'm surprised to see Richard changed a lot. It's been what, 20 years almost. Last time I saw you.
Well,
I have a good memory of you though. So I don't know what's going on in this meeting.
Well, we're just talking about writing for Manchester.
But anyway, what I was going to ask you about next, 13 for dinner.
Oh yeah.
13 for dinner. Why did you then write a play called that?
I entirely blame Nick Marston for that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'd written it roughly, I suppose, and he was interested, and I can't quite remember what happened. I was sitting at his kitchen table and he said, well, finish it. And I said, well, I haven't got a frame for it. And he said, don't bother about that, just finish it. And I did, and it worked. And was it the first time? The first time we did it, Tim Donnelly played Agatha.
Yeah.
And he was marvelous. He kept changing his accent to a different char.
Yeah.
So you got the Cockney char and the Northern char and the Dorset char, and and at the very end of the play, she has a line where he said, "I do wish you would be consistent."
Yeah.
And then we got Sally Sheridan to play it in the next production. She was lovely, directed by Sheila. And yeah, it was vaguely criticizing religion, I suppose. But we'd had no interest from the box office, and then suddenly this Christian group found out about it and started protesting outside the theatre, and suddenly we sold out. And I went up to the leader of these protesters and said, "Thank you so much." And he said, "Are you two with our Lord or something?" And I said, "No, I'm the playwright." And yeah, we sold out, and it did awfully well. Hiya.
Hello, how you doing?
Oh dear, here she is. Now we're in
Hello,
trouble.
Giovanna.
Now, what you mean? God. Are you having fun?
Yep. 13 for dinner was a genuine thing. I'm an atheist. I puzzle about Christianity. And I just had this idea about what would Agatha Christie have done with Christianity and belief and proof, which is what that is all about.
Yes, I remember doing a reading of it, and
You were in, I think, the first production, weren't you, with Tim?
yeah, we did a reading with Tim, and I think it was an actor called Norman Dial, and
He was normal.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we did this reading of it at the Green Room, and there were various things that came up from the audience, and they were kind of it seemed to be quite to get into issues that excited people.
13 for dinner was an uncompleted script which he read, and I asked him to direct it. I do remember him saying, "Just finish it." And I'm so grateful to him, because I did just finish it in some way, and he directed it for the first time. And that was a lesson. It was quite early on in my writing career, and I thought the advice, "just finish it," was very good advice.
Have you ever, what's the word, translated or adapted?
There is a novel of French paste, as yet unpublished, but there is one. Yeah. And I've also transposed stuff into other media. Yeah, yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. In fact, How to Dispose of a Human Corpse is one of the projects, as yet unfinished, that I'm trying to get done for TV. And I now called it Arlington Drive. And I've got about 2/3 of it done, and I'm struggling through it. I haven't got a contract, so of course it will take me forever.
And when did you write your last play for theatre? What year was that?
Well, I suppose Mother's Day, which I wrote for TV. I've written it for theatre, and there's a company in Ruislip who wants to do it, and I've written it for stage. So I suppose it's that.
Blood Sports.
That started because my friend Annie and Paul lived upstairs from me, and I used to eavesdrop on them, and they were very funny. And then there was, I think it was the Pink Paper Awards at the Drill Hall. And my friend Tim, who's in French Pace, bless him, he's been responsible for a lot. But he rang me up and he said, why don't you submit Blood Sports? And I said, I'm not sure it would go. And he said, oh, change it to a lesbian relationship. I'll love that. And he also advised me to put it forward under the name R. Gallagher rather than Richard, so they wouldn't know what gender I was. And I did this.
And that was performed at the Drill Hall.
They were amazed that I was a man. And in fact, it worked much better as a lesbian relationship, and I've kept it as that. And it's been done 3 times since. But yeah.
Tim's a really brilliant guy, isn't he? I mean, I've always been very impressed by his intellect. How much influence did he have on your writing?
Hugely. I don't think it would have happened around Bridgeton. No. Absolutely hugely. He beyond that, once rang me up. I was living in Northampton, and he said that there's this company wants gay erotica, and I said, well, I can't write gay erotica. And he said, oh, you're always out of work, you're always complaining. Write something. I did. 9 years later, I was still writing it. I published 9 books. and that was just because he said, oh, go and do it.
Empress. Empress was written for the Manchester Festival for our company, Raw Material.
Yeah, I'm a great treat. I know the reviews weren't very good. Didn't care about that really. I thought it was good. We improvised for a lot. First time I'd done that. I improvised and then written for the characters that they were creating. I remember particularly Karen Crook being obsessed with chickens, which I loved. But it was framed within Catherine the Great's reign, but was of course really about Margaret Thatcher, which is possibly why it won't live to see another production, because it is so based on Thatcherism. But it was great fun to do, and I thought it was splendid.
You told me earlier that you'd written this from improvisation, and that
Yeah,
you'd actually written the parts for the actors who played the parts, who were the great Karen Crook, Philippa Cosler, Lorraine Hackett, and Phil Dennison, I think, and another actor, I can't remember.
there was a wonderful man whose name I've forgotten, who played the actor who followed them and was a little one step behind. Can't remember.
Yeah,
He was wonderful.
and it was directed by Bill Hopkinson, who you had actually requested as the director.
Yeah.
I produced it.
Yeah.
But you didn't want me to direct it because that's never been done since. Okay, have any other plays been done since?
Well, Bloodsport certainly have. 3 or 4 times. French Pace quite a few times. 13 for Dinner was done in Australia, actually.
Really?
Which was nice. I didn't see it.
No.
Yeah.
Odd, isn't it? Mother's Day. Let's finish off with that. Mother's Day was actually not a piece that you wrote for theatre. That was.
It started off as a short story.
For Yorkshire Television.
A lot of them, to be fair, updated. And it was most interesting with French Paste because when we lost it in West End, it was dated. And so I made it dated. And in fact, I realized that when I'd written it during the 1987 tornadoes, which wrecked havoc over the company, over the country. And so I started it when we did it at Questers with Michael Fish. Now, we weren't supposed to do that because the BBC had some sort of copyright. So when we did it properly at the Shaw Theatre, we asked Michael Fish himself to do it, which he did.
Who's your favourite actor that you worked with? Is it Tim Donnelly? I mean, is he? I mean, he seems to have.
Tim and I row. Who's my favourite actor
that you've worked with? I mean, I can answer that question immediately. You know, I think most writers, directors can. You have a muse, don't you?
Tim is very important. I worked with Dorothy Chewton, and I was playing a very small part in the play written by Ronnie Harwood. And I thought she was marvelous. Right, okay. I'd say Karen Crook.
Yeah, that's what I would say as well. It's quite something, isn't it, that she's so little known and but so highly regarded by writers and directors who worked at that time, who were privileged enough to work with her. What's the difference between theatre and fiction? When you're writing fiction, is that a different process for writing for the theatre, or are you? I kind of feel that it is.
I get that question because theatre is fiction. Of course it is. Even
Yeah.
if you're writing about something which is factual, as in the case of Tori Parker, you will have to fictionalize it because it won't fit on a stage in 2 hours with one set if you don't. So it's the same thing. Of course you fictionalize it. You invent things. And I think you're perfectly at liberty to do that. Can you define the question?
You're writing for characters, aren't you? In theatre.
Always, yeah.
You're writing for actors, and you're writing.
Whether or not it's a real person or somebody you've invented, of course, yes. That's where you start. Yeah. I do remember a lovely story when I wrote my first of those, which I kind of did because I had no money. And I was taken out to dinner by my editor, who was a wonderful lady called Rebecca. And she said, "Darling, you've used the word epicene." And I said, "Yeah, perfectly good word. What's wrong with it?" She said, "Can't use that." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Oh, we don't want them running to the dictionary in the middle of a whack." Which I thought was awful. I kept the word in. But yeah, even that, the gay erotica, I largely, well, a lot of them were based on historical fact.
Yeah.
I used stuff like emigration to Australia, forced emigration sometimes. I used stuff like I spent a lot of time in Egypt, so I wrote one about that, which ended up being about gun running. I wrote about J. Edgar Hoover, which I was very interested in. So yeah, my main characters weren't real people, but I used a lot of real people in it.
French based. Wasn't that based on a real relationship between two men?
Yes and no.
No.
French Based came about because Tim asked for a play, and I said, "What can I write about in quite a short period of time?" And he said, "Write about me." And I did. But it's not Tim. It's not Tim in any way, shape, or form. But it is very much based on him. Nor is it me, but it's very much based on me. But no.
Dorothy Parker.
That is the older lady reviewing her life. And I made up, for example, the fact that she had this great antipathy to A.A. Milne. I know she wrote a scathing review of one of A.A. Milne's plays. But when I was researching it, which I have no basis for at all, I made it up.
Yeah.
I found out that she never had children. And I kind of supposed that secretly she always wanted to have. And this was a driving force in her cynicism. I've no justification for that. I made it up. But it's quite possible.
Is the important thing to give the folks a good show?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In fact, I'll put it on to something else. I was asked once what a reviewer's job was, because I was a theatre reviewer for a long time. And is it to give the readership a good read? Is it to keep a watchword on theatre? Is it to tell the audience what to go and see? Or various other things. Basically, I thought, no, I'm there for my readership. That was my view, and several very eminent people will disagree with me. Yeah, I think it is to give your audience a good show. If you end up preaching at them, if you end up lecturing, then why would you expect them to go and pay and see it? Yeah, the ultimate thing was to give the audience a good show, for me. Other people may disagree, but I think that.
Who do you think is the best playwright of modern times, apart from yourself?
I wouldn't think myself. It's a very difficult question. I can go to my favourites. My favourites are Stoppard, Alan Bennett, and in fact, recently things I've discovered, which a friend of ours wrote, Amelia Bullmore. Wonderful stuff. They are so different, you can't compare them. They're totally different. Stoppard is very intellectual and clever. Amelia's work is very real, and she might object to this word, but feminist. Bennett is just real northern, and I grew up in the north, and I know those people. So you then have to think about the stuff that you did, and the stuff that Ricky Tarascus did, and the stuff that Steve Burkoff did, all of which is hugely different from what I grew up on, which was Weekly Rep, which was basically French windows and a sofa and murder mystery or whatever. Which I'm still fond of, and I do not decry it, but it is very different to what came in the 80s, which we now kind of see as a bit standard, but in the 80s that was really inventive and pushing boundaries. And
Are you talking about things like
movie, invasion of the cliches, all that sort of thing? I think, in our own humble way, we were groundbreakers. The time we were, people weren't doing that. I think of people like the Wally Range All Stars, Red Stockings, Maggie and Sue.
lip service?
Lip service. And that was all new. That was all new. You were doing stuff with virtually nothing. Brilliant. Tower was the first one outside legitimate, in inverted commas, theatre. And then it was you. And I called them the boys, Adrian, Tony, who were GDM theatre. GDM, which stood for Great Dot Mail, after a quote of Quentin Crisps. I did several things for them. I directed Kiss of the Spider Woman, I wrote How to Dispose of Human Corpse, and I directed, I think, the most successful production of The Maids that I did with them. And yeah, they were successful and ran for a while, but sadly are not anymore. And then other ones like Caboodle and what you will know, certainly Maggie and Sue with Lip Service are still working at it, and they've survived it all. But I don't think that really matters. Plays are ephemeral, and we did them, and what banner we did them under didn't really matter. We did them. There is a novel of French-based, as yet unpublished, but there is one. Yeah. And I've also transposed stuff into other media. Yeah, yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. In fact, How to Dispose of a Human Corpse is one of the projects, as yet unfinished, that I'm trying to get done for TV. And I've now called it Arlington Drive. And I've got about 2/3 of it done, and I'm struggling through it. I haven't got a contract, so of course it will take me forever.
How do you make money?
I work for Questions Theatre as a drama school teacher. I sell my body in Piccadilly Circus nightly. It's half price most of the time, so it doesn't make very much. That's a lie, by the way. And I do bits of editing, whatever books I can get contracts for, ghostwriting, proofreading, all that sort of stuff.
I remember you sent me a novel that you kind of ghost written.
She was a lady, elderly lady, who'd spent 2 or 3 years during the 50s as a prostitute's maid, and wrote very lovingly of A, Soho, and B, the prostitute. And she'd written about it, but the book she'd written was never going to get anywhere. And between about 3 or 4 of us, we got that into publication. I rewrote it from interviews and from her original transcript, of course. I remember, for instance, that there was a big gap where she claimed she was at a party that she later claimed she was excluded from. And so I thought, well, we can't have both of those things. So I invented the scene where she was sitting on the stairs, listening in at the door. And she said, oh, yes, I remember that. I thought, no, you didn't. I made it up. But that's the sort of thing you have to do. You also have to bring the chapters to cliffhangers so people want to read the next chapter. So, yeah, going back to your question about, you said theatre and fiction, I would say fact and fiction. You play it around a bit fast and loose, but we kind of have to make it work. And in the end, the intent of the entire thing is true. Not every incident or word is true. But I don't mind them. It's a story, and you're writing for a readership. And the overall thing is true. I had this conversation a long time ago with a friend of mine who objected to can't remember the name of the film, but it was a film about the IRA, where it was Daniel Day-Lewis and somebody, and they were in a cell opposite, next to each other in the film, which my friend claimed was not the truth. It probably wasn't. And he said, "Well, they shouldn't do that." And I said, "Well, if they hadn't done it, there wouldn't have been a film." they had to put them in the same space. And I really don't mind that. I don't mind, for instance, Queen Elizabeth meeting Mary Queen of Scots, which we know she never did. But it kind of furthers the plot and gets us to where we need to be. You can't put all of history into something. You have to take shortcuts, and sometimes you have to invent things. Fiction in novels, you can get inside somebody's head. You can describe exactly what they're thinking.
Yeah.
You can describe other people's view of what they're thinking. In theatre, of course, you only have what they're saying. And the audience then have to make up their own minds about what's underneath that. In what you're calling fiction, in books, you can say it. You can say exactly what's.
How do you deal with that as a writer?
As a writer of theatre, and one of the people you asked me who's my favourite playwrights, master of it, is Alan Bennett, who can say things. He can put things into the mouths of his characters, and you know exactly what's going on in their head, and it's not what they're saying. And sometimes it's absurd. I mean, a great line of his was, "That tea looks strong, pull the curtains." And you know that woman disapproves of the person she's talking to. So I think in theatre, that's what you've got to do. You've got to imply it, and then it becomes the actor's job and the director's job to put it across so the audience know exactly what the subtext is. In fiction, in books, you can say it. It's not necessarily easier, but it's different. Harold Pinter, much to my mind, is understood. People all talk about the Pinterest balls and everything, and all think it's quite surrealistic. In fact, if you're playing Pinter correctly, to my mind, I think it should just sound like normal speech. The territory is surreal. Everything around it is surreal. But in fact, his dialogue and the way he writes it is absolutely normal speech. And people don't quite get this. And they think, oh, these Pinterest boards and things. Yeah, okay. He did insist a bit on them. But that was to make it sound like natural speech. It wasn't to make it sound. I've seen with Beckett actually. It wasn't to make it sound weird or poetic or and Pinter's dialogue is brilliant. It is just like the nonsense we all talk. So is Beckett.
Who are you influenced by?
Bennett, and somebody we mentioned last time, Dora Bryan. Dora worked with a wonderful sketch writer called Alan Melville, who taught me a lot. And to write sketches, I think, is brilliant, because you have to condense everything. You have to get the joke in, yeah, but you have to condense a story into 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And Alan Melville was brilliant at it. Roy Barraclough, who did write, and in fact, I did several of his pantomimes. Mel Coward, his construction possibly influenced me. But no, I basically kind of did it on the hoof. I sometimes have deliberations about, I have an idea and it hasn't been commissioned. I've got one at the moment, actually. And I don't know whether it's a novel or a play. And I'm toying around with that, wondering which one it is. I've started both, haven't finished either, and still don't know whether this, is it a novel or is it a play? I don't know. And that's interesting, but that's not to do with how difficult it is. It's just to do with where does it fit? How can I progress the story? I suppose more easily, going back to your question about which is more difficult, how could I progress it more easily? Could I progress it more easily in novel form or in play form? I don't know the answer to that question yet. I'm trying to find out. Because I don't know, and I never do know, where my plays or books finish. I let that happen organically. And I don't know where this one is going to end up. So I'm trying to find a way, whether it be through a novel or a play or whatever else, that I can find a way to develop these characters to a satisfactory plot conclusion. I haven't got that yet.
Are you led by your characters?
Oh, very much, yeah. Yeah. Yes, I let characters do what they do. I don't map things out for them, because then I think you get them slotting things that they wouldn't want to do. No, I'm very much based on the character. Then I give them some sort of conflict to work with, and then I keep heaping conflicts on them and seeing where we get.
Ken Campbell used to say, torture the hero.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mostly agree with Ken.
He was a big fan of your acting, and he's dead, so there we go.
Probably the only ever fan of my acting, and he's dead.
What inspires you as a writer?
People, always. Sometimes you'll never get to the end of these. There's a play I've been writing for years, but it was inspired by a woman I saw on a boat in Egypt. And I just suddenly started to imagine about her life. And she's fascinated me ever since. And I've made up a lot, and I'm sure a lot of it is completely inaccurate, and it doesn't matter. She fired me. And the most thing that inspired me about that was she was wearing gold sandals, was dressed up like a dog's dinner, and was trying to be classy. and I thought that was really touching and nice. And she wasn't classy, but she was desperately trying to be, and I loved. I loved that. I just saw a person and started dreaming up a story for her. So it's people.
Richard, it's been great talking to you, and I'm going to edit this interview and I'll put it onto the YouTube channel about the Manchester Fringe, because that contained a lot of stuff that we hadn't been able to get around to before in the interviews. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, darling. Lovely to go back.